What's up, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. I'm James, that's Katie, and that makes this the first ever episode number 4 of the Cloud Control Gaming Podcast.
Yes, wonderful. James, we got a cool show today, but I learned something really funny the other day, and I want to tell you a quick little fun gaming fact first. So, you know how like Skyrim is like just the biggest hotness for the last like 27 years, right? There was a little known game called Oblivion.
Very little known
game
game
out
called
first.
Oblivion, yes.
And so this game is still getting modded. There's all sorts of fun stuff happening. And I read an article the other day, a friend sent it to me. There's a new mod called Pizza Oblivion, and somebody modded it so that like it makes an NPC in like the main city, and you go to talk to him and like legitimately order a Domino's pizza to your house through the mod.
Holy shit, really?
Yeah.
So you like put your address in?
You
there?
have to like go in, there's like a file that comes, like a text file when you like download the mod. You have to go in and like edit it with like your delivery details and stuff. And apparently like you can actually order it. But the funniest part of this whole thing is like unless you go in and edit it, the like default order is a 12-inch thin crust pizza. I don't know what kind, like a 12-inch thin crust.
Probably pepperoni or cheese.
8 garlic bread twists. And a 20-ounce bottle of Fuse lemon tea.
Hell yeah.
And it's about $28.
That's amazing. That's crazy. I could, like, for one thing, like the mod itself, kind of whatever, right? Like modding an old game like that, I'm sure it's been done 100 times with Thomas the Train and like all these things.
Of course.
But the fact that you can actually order a pizza.
You can actually order a pizza. We were laughing though because the guy like encourages you like make sure to go in and like edit the text file first to like put your address in and stuff. And we were laughing about the idea of like, what if you don't, like how many pizzas did this guy get ordered to his house because people don't change it?
There, you know what? There's probably a huge market for scamming there too, because when you're not on the phone, like you don't have to talk to someone and you can just enter whatever you want into a text file. Like they're probably ordering pizzas to like the Empire State Building over and over again.
So anyways,
amazing.
We hope this guy like released them on and got like 300 pizzas. Like imagine all the garlic bread twists that showed up in his house.
I'm already too twisted up. I can't.
And anyway, you never underestimate the creativity of the modding community.
It's an S tier mod, Kate. And
that is an S tier mod.
And everybody, speaking of tiers, we have a fun show today, like you mentioned. We are actually doing something we've been planning for a very long time as the main segment of the show today, which is a tier list for all of our favorite creature catching games, which is like Pokemon, Digimon, Electabuzz, Mug, all this good stuff. So we're going to rank those in a tier list. We have 14 games to go over and give our rankings on. So we're going to get to that in just a second, followed by, of course, our own topic picks after that. And a listener mail question as well, although this time it's not a question. We actually wrote in for some put a tweet out there for some responses of what are some of your favorite creature catching games. So we got some of listener responses as well, which is really nice. Of course, you can always send those messages to CloudControlPod at proton.me if you wish to get in touch, as we remind you all the time, which is great. But we've got a cool show. We're looking forward to doing this list for quite a while. So let's just get right into it. And we have here, as you can see on the screen if you're a video listener, we have a tier chart we've put together from S, A, B, C, and D. There's 5 tiers. We have 14 creature catching games to go over and put on this list. So is there any other like stipulations around it?
I guess the other thing to say is like there might be a few big games on here that are missing from our list, but we wanted to pick games exclusively that at least one of us had played, because it's a little disingenuous to rank something that you've never experienced. So stuff like Yokai Watch and like Monster Crown, we know are really big games now, but we just haven't gotten around to playing them. So
that's right. So every game on this list that we're ranking, at least one of us has played it to the extent to where we can talk about it. And like you said, there's some games we haven't played. So at the top of the segment, before we start ranking, we thought it'd be fun too. Like, I think we were talking the other day and we're like, it would be fun to play like another game of this, like in this genre that we've not tried, and add it into the list later. So we're going to put it out there as a vote for everyone who listens to the show you can either vote for Yokai Watch, Monster Crown, or Monster Hunter Stories, which are the 3 games that we've kind of decided we could try. Or you can also write in with a different option if you want. But whichever one of those wins the poll, we'll eventually play that and add it into the tier list as well. So remember those games. They'll be in the show notes or whatever too. Okay, so I guess we'll just go in order of the games on this list, which means our first game to rank is Bugsnax.
Everyone's most notable creature capture game. But I think technically it counts. You catch them.
So yeah, Bugsnax is for sure a creature catching game, right? Like you're going around, it's I guess they're half creature, half food, but you're catching them. And I guess like the crux of these creature catching games is that one of the main mechanics is that the catching is integral. Like you have to catch and you have to be able to do something with the creatures.
Yes.
So in Bugsnax, you're catching little vegetables and fruits and you're feeding them to people in the town who then become mutated with like their parts. And so I think this game, I mean, it's not amazing, but I think I like the way that it uses the creatures you catch to do something that's a bit different than the rest of the games on the list.
That's true. And I will give it points as well for having very creative creatures. Like they had the concept of everything's food, but they made some cute things. Like there's like I think like the butterfly, but he's like fries or something, and he's got like the wings. And there's like Bunger is a classic staple character.
Yeah, Strawby, I think I remember.
Yeah, he's like a little he's got like little spider legs or something. He's a strawberry. Like there was some creative. Like,
well, and you get the little traps too. Like I struggle to remember all the details of Bugsnax because I mean it was
like a
launch
fever
on
dream.
PS5. It was a couple
like a fever
years
dream
ago,
that happened to everyone.
Yeah, but I mean I like the way there's little tools you kind of lay down. Like I wish I could remember them better. I tried to go back and look at all these games, but there's so many. Wasn't able to get all the details. But I think Bugsnax is good, but not great.
Yeah,
is what I would say.
I think that B tier is really the
B
stands
tier
for Bugsnax. Like it's pretty like in the middle, I would say.
Well, one thing about Bugsnax, which I think is to its benefit, is the mystery of the world. I remember when we were talking about it, there was all those rumors of like, is Bugsnax a horror game?
Yes.
Like, what's kind of happening? And that's kind of discussion is never had around any of these games. Like a lot of these games, Pokemon, Digimon, all the kind of standard ones, they're all very lighthearted and
I mean, to be fair, I think a lot of that discussion came from people memeing on Bugsnax, right? Because like it was just the environment in which it came out, where it was like there aren't very many PS5 exclusives. Like here's Bugsnax.
I mean, you're not wrong about that. So but it's something that I remember having that feeling. It
sparked a lot of like discussion, and that's not something you can say about every one of these games at the very least. So
okay, well, I'm down to put Bugsnax in B for now. We can always move them around.
A solid B.
Okay. So. The next game coming up here was one of my favorite inclusions on the list. Longtime listeners of, I guess, our past content would know, we love Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. We know it's flawed. We know the game isn't good, but it's great. Come on, it's a fucking awesome game.
It's not just good. It's good enough.
So one of the main best features of SA2B is the Chao Garden. And I guess if people have never played SA2B, basically you have little Chaos, or like little... What is a Chao? Like it's a little cherub creature almost.
Eggy cheruby little boy.
Yeah, and you can go around the different Sonic levels and find little creatures like unicorns or monkeys or different things in the game.
Bunch of types of animals.
Little animals, and you again feed them to your. It's kind of like Bugsnax actually.
It's kind of
you
similar
feed them to your
Bugsnax.
Chao, and then the Chao grows like parts of that animal. And now that I remember that, I remember saying Bugsnax is just an evolved Chao Garden. That was I think I put that on Twitter a few weeks ago.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But the best part about the Chao Garden, is you'd have like they live in this little garden. You could play like little mini games and stuff with them, but you'd feed them the animal, and it would get like up parts of the gorilla. You could get like gorilla arms or legs or like the head. And there were some animals that were like, oh man, it looks so cool when you get like the unicorn horn, but like fuck, I don't want the unicorn's stupid hooves on the hands.
Right.
So you'd so you'd be so stressed, you'd be feeding it like, come on horn. You'd be like, no, he got feet.
Yeah, and then you're like, well, I need to get something else. I'll have to get another animal and get rid of the feet, but then you get rid of the horn that you did get too.
Yeah.
And it's just
you didn't have a lot of control. And the funny part, the best part was like all the Chaos would live in the same garden, and so like my Chaos would be in there and your Chaos would be in there, and then then you'd like you do your level, you come back with your animals, and be like, oh man, like I really hate how the gorilla looks. Like, I'll feed it to James's Chao. Like the next time you come back, your Chao looks stupid. Like, no.
I seem to remember when we played that game, we had like an agreed upon Chao that was like you feed all the stuff you don't want to it.
That's true. We had like that garbage dumpster Chao where it's just sort of
dumpster
like you like feed the stuff you didn't want.
Yeah,
that's true.
Okay, so I mean, we've had a little nostalgia trip.
We did.
The Chao Garden, though, like to be fair, it is a side mode in a main game.
Yeah.
I don't think it can rank really high on this list because of its limitations. Like once you get past like the feeding and the making of your Chao, very exciting. But what you're actually doing, I mean, you can pick them up with Sonic and like rock them. You know, like you can get Eggman to like rock them back.
You could like throw them in some water, see if they can swim. But it was pretty limited.
And the only things you could really do aside from that would be to do the racing or the battling with the Chaos. And they were very loose mini games. Like you don't really do anything. You more or less just see what happens based on your Chao stats. Like you know,
it's almost a stretch to call it a creature capture. Really,
it's not really a game. I think. I mean, looking at the tier list now, there's no way that it's better than Bugsnax.
It is
there's
not
no
better
way,
than Bugsnax.
Objectively, I think it's D or C.
I
mean. Okay. My feelings on it, I really like it.
Yes.
In terms of how much I like the Chao Garden, I might put it in ahead of Bugsnax. But on the tier list, I mean, we can put it in C if you want.
Okay, only because it goes with our scheming so far where it's C for Chao Garden.
That's right.
And we might need to put a few more tiers on if we keep this alphabetized list.
Yeah, Nexomon's going to be hard. All right, so the next game we have, and these are loose as well. We can move them around.
Yeah.
We can move them around. The next game coming up, I guess, is going in D tier. It's Digimon Cyber Sleuth Story.
Oh no, but it's so good.
But hang on a second here, because we've reached our first powerhouse of the rankings list, and this is a game that I rank personally very highly, and I think you like it a lot too. Cyber Sleuth is just, I think, looking at this without having discussed these ones, it might be my personal highest rank in terms of a creature catching game. It just has everything. It's fast paced. It's easy to catch a lot of creatures, and you're easily incentivized to use them all on your team. You can switch them out so fast. Leveling up doesn't take a long time. There's branching evolution paths. The battling is interesting. You know, there's type matchups you got to worry about. It's like 3-on-3, which is fun. There's just the game itself is just so enjoyable to play, you know, like it has such a clip to it. And one of those things about creature catching games is like some of them I think are like, oh, it takes so long to get new mons, or you're not really encouraged to use a lot, but this game doesn't have either of those problems, and I think it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think this game ranks higher coming from the creature capture aspect, because that's easily the best part of the game. Like, you know, the story's kind of, it's not great, right? Like, there's a few issues I would say I have with the game, but when you look at it specifically from that lens of creature capture, I think it might be the strongest just in terms of how that mechanic works. Because like you said, like in a lot of games, like obviously we'll get to Pokemon later, but it's like you're really encouraged to have 6 Pokemon, and only 6, because
unless you like grinding or like, you know.
Yeah, but like that's not really, like, I wouldn't say that's fun, right? Like the game, for how you progress in the game, you're encouraged to have that set team, and you can change it, but like it almost like is like a setback to change a little bit, because you gotta like then catch up XP wise. But in Cyber Sleuth, not only does every character in your party get XP, regardless of if they're used in the battle, but all the Digimon in your box get XP all the time. So you cannot go 5 minutes in this game without being like, oh, something's ready to Digivolve. And then you have that like chart, you have like multiple options of which they're going to Digivolve into. And that's really exciting, because it's like, oh, like I haven't picked this one yet. Let's see what it is. Or like,
yeah. And the good thing about that too is you can also like de-evolve your guys and then take a different branch on the path. So if you have the credentials to do 2, you can like check off 2 things at once.
Yeah, and it's just like this constant dopamine hit of like, oh, Digivolve, oh, Digivolve, oh, Digivolve, and like you're constantly swapping your team out. And I just, in terms of like how much I felt like I was using all the monsters and getting to see them all, that's like exactly what, like, S tier for the creature catching aspect.
I think so. And I know there's like, I guess there would be a devil's advocate argument to a bit of this in terms of like, you know, if you want to use Pokemon as an example, there's something cool about having or you could argue there's something cool about, I started with Charizard and I've had this guy on my team the whole time, and it's like an adventure that we've had together. Whereas Cyber Sleuth, you're not really able, even if you want to keep just one singular guy and never change him, because his, the way the leveling works, you would just be too weak. So you have to cycle your team a lot, and I guess you could argue like, there's less of that. You get attached to your mons, but that's not what I'm there for, and that's not what you're there for.
And I know it's a big deal for, like, some people even like bring their mons from like one game to another game. They like actually transfer them like throughout the generations. But I agree, that's not what I get into. What I'm excited about is seeing the new ones and like seeing what they evolve into, and like constantly getting that like new exciting hit of what's next.
Exactly. And I think Digimon is also really strong in terms of like character design, like over the Chaos and the Bugsnax. The Bugsnax are kind of funny food puns, but at the end of the day, like the Digimon characters are so much more
Digimon characters are
interesting.
Cool. The one downside I'll say to that is like it is way too frequent that you have to accidentally make poop to like get to the next stage. Like sometimes you're at the Digivolve and it's like, all right, there's this one guy I've had already, and like 2 versions of basically just that Poomon, and like I fucking hate that guy. I hate that guy so much. And I remember there being like multiple times in the game like, oh god, he's my only option. Oh god, he's yellow this time, but still my only option. So negative points on him, but otherwise overall the design is very strong. Yeah.
And again, there's a lot of palette swaps and stuff if you want to kind of pick it apart, but in general, like the quantity is just really big. And so I think we've kind of solidified this is an S tier for now. In terms of creature catching. I would put it up
in their S tier. I think an A tier game, S tier creature capture game.
Agreed. Okay, so we have one more Digimon game on the list, which is Digimon World 1. And this is a game we had a long time ago back in like, I guess when it came out, like back on PS1. And I don't know how well either of us really remember this one, but I mean, I did some research on it last night, you could say, and kind of watched it. And maybe if you want to go first and what you remember about it.
This game is one of those games where I remember it with emotion and not with any concrete details, because I think I was just so young when we used to play it. And I don't think I ever really played it alone. I think I played with you or like a friend, and like kind of like let you navigate it, because I maybe like was still learning to read or like some shit when we played this. So looking back on it now, it's come back to me in terms of like how you train them by taking them in those little like obstacle courses. They just get like kind of beat up until they eventually learn how to do the course. And then there you do take them out on like adventures and catch new creatures. No, well, I'm very vague on this one.
It's an interesting game. It's kind of like a Tamagotchi, like an expanded Tamagotchi. Like 50% of the game is you're feeding your Digimon, you are taking it to the bathroom, you are training it up in the obstacle course on different activities to increase different stats. And then the evolution is interesting. Like they evolve basically once a certain amount of time has passed, or when the stats hit a certain threshold, and then you just get what you get. And your Digimon has like a lifespan. So eventually, depending on different things you do or like how long it's been, your Digimon will like go all the way up to its final form, and then it will pass away, and you start with another egg and you like restart. So it's kind of interesting in the terms of like, it's out of all the games we've had so far, I think it's more like simi in the sense that you're like taking care of a creature and then battling is less of it. But at the same time, the game, I remember it being quite frustrating, because once you get past the training part, you would go and explore the adventure kind of thing where you're fighting Digimon in the wild and going to different areas. But the problem is that eventually your Digimon dies, and then you have no choice but to spend the next however long training up a new Digimon to be as strong as the one you had before, so you can continue the adventure where you were at, because otherwise you're too weak. And it caused, I remember it causing just huge lulls in like progressing in the game.
It's very bad pacing and balance between the two. This almost seems like it was a really cool idea, but just very flawed execution.
And the battle system's kind of weird. Like you're more so like kind of giving loose commands to your guy, like, be offensive, and they'll like attack.
The kind of commands you'd give to like party members in a JRPG.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I mean, I think nostalgically is cool. Like Digimon, we just said, is like a really interesting universe, like Leomon, and when you're evolving your guy and you don't know what it's gonna be, what it's gonna turn into, it is very exciting to like see what it turns into. Again, another flaw with it would be is if you do get Numamon, the poo Digimon,
You're
like
stuck with the
you
poo.
have to play with it because you can't like go back.
You gotta
can't
wait
change
till
it.
he dies and like.
You do.
God.
And I guess you could save scum it, but you know, whatever. That's not a benefit of the game save scumming. So I mean, I personally, I think this is a C or D tier game.
Yeah. I'm gonna let you have the responsibility on this one because I don't think I remember it well enough.
I'm gonna toss it on to the end of C right now. Okay. And then depending how we need to adjust, we'll do that.
Okay.
So considering I was the expert on Digimon World 1, our next game is Fae Tactics, and that's you. So
I'm the expert on this one. So this is probably a more unusual one, but I think it's still got a pretty good creature capture mechanic. So how it works is this one is kind of like it's one of those like top-down turn-based, like the grid style.
Yeah, like Final Fantasy Tactics.
It's very Final Fantasy Tactics. Actually, why I got into it. But you have like your main character, and you have a couple other like named like protagonist kind of characters that are always in your party. But in addition to that, you get to bring 3 monsters with you every time. And when you fight wild monsters, you have like a chance where they'll drop like their like, it's like a card.
It's like their essence.
Their essence, the card, whatever it is. And you can pick it up. So you catch monsters by battling them. It's just like a percentage chance when they die. And then they get permanently added to like your team. And every battle you go into, you get to select 3 monsters to take with you. But what's cool is it still has like an elemental kind of system where there's like fire, water, grass, whatever, and they all are good against each other. And your main characters have the elements as well.
Right.
So like it is a system. It's not just for the monsters. It's a system within the game. And then they all have like their own different moves that they do. So like one of the ones I remember liking was like a fire turtle, and he was really slow. He couldn't move very far, but he'd do like a big long range kind of like AoE, like fire blast he'd shoot. Whereas you'd have like a bird that would fly very far and just kind of peck one square. And so it's kind of like all the monsters I think felt pretty unique, which was a cool thing about it. And what I liked as well is that there wasn't really an XP system for them. I think they did level up, but it was very minimal. And so it was more about like surveying your enemies on the battlefield and going, well, they've got a lot of grass. So like I can take a couple fire guys with me, and then I'll take maybe one electric to deal with like that other guy, and he'll be like sent off to deal with that one guy in the corner that's, you know, weak to electric. Yeah. And so it kind of became almost like it was really like the strategy element was cool of who you brought in. And then also like it was just fun like collecting all these monsters and getting to sort of switch them out as you needed.
And do the monsters evolve and change just like in other games? So
that was the one downside to this creature capture is the monsters don't evolve. They just are what they are when you get them.
Right. I guess because if they don't level up, they're not going to.
Yeah, there wasn't really much of a level up. You kind of just got them. But what was cool is like as you progress the game, you just keep getting new ones. So like maybe by the time I didn't finish the game, but I think probably by the end, like instead of bringing, you know, the little bird, maybe you have a better flying guy that you tend to bring more frequently. The other one cool little thing about it was, you know what? It wasn't actually 3 monsters. I'm lying. You got 3 pips.
How dare you lie?
How dare I lie? You had 3 pips, I think. 3 or 4 pips to bring. It usually was 3 monsters because you'd bring 3 like of 1 pip for quite a while. But eventually you would start to get like monsters that cost 2. So that was another consideration of like, I'll have 1 less creature, but this one is a bit stronger if I bring the 2 pip guy and then a 1 pip.
So I'm looking at this from 2 angles.
Yeah.
Angle 1, negative point. There's no evolution.
Yeah.
Because that's always a huge, exciting portion of these games. Angle 2, though, which is a benefit, and similar to what we said about Bugsnax, is that the way that this game has you interacting with your creatures is very unique. Yeah. Like there's no other game on this list that's like an RTS, like, or not an RTS, but like a strategy, like board top-down strategy kind of game. Like they're usually turn-based combat. So I think that's a bonus. But again, because I haven't played it, I would say is your judgment call on how good that system runs in this game.
I think it runs pretty well. I think the game overall is pretty decent. Like the story's shit, and then like you do a lot of faffing about and like side missions that don't mean anything, but it is a cute game. The monster design is nice. It's pretty simple. They're all very kind of like basic animals with a twist. And I actually would say, like, if you like creature capture and if you like that kind of like style of game, it's honestly a pretty good game to pick up and like just play around with.
And it's on Game Pass. Or it was. I don't think it is anymore.
Yeah, it's not where I played it, but it is on Game Pass. I would say this is a solid like B tier game. Like it's just good. It's just pretty good. And
so would you put it?
I would put it before Bugsnax.
Better than Bugsnax?
I would say it's better than Bugsnax because I think like the monsters, the way you use them is a little bit more integral to the game. The thing about Bugsnax is it's got a lot of catching, but not a lot of using them after.
That's right.
Whereas this is cool. It's like, oh yeah, I just got the fire salamander. Like, oh, I hope I can use him next level, right? And like, so.
Okay, I like that. Okay, next game, Monster Rancher Advance, and. This one's interesting because the original Monster Rancher, for those that don't know, is a PS1 game, and it's one of my like favorite kind of quirky mechanics. Okay. The game itself, I mean, I don't remember the PS1 game so well, but what was cool about it for Monster Rancher is that on the PS1, again, everyone discs were a thing. You had to have a disc, and you would actually take the way you got new monsters in Monster Rancher on PS1 is you take the disc out of your PlayStation while the game is running. You would put any other CD you had, like it could be a music CD or DVD or whatever you had, you put it in and it would scan some code and generate a monster in the game. And it would be like, that's how you would get your creatures. Like that's a really cool mechanic. But we're talking about the GBA game here, which doesn't have that benefit being a GBA game. And then, the battle system, from what I remember too, is just very much you're moving like left and right. It's so this weird action type of focus, but I don't really ever understand what was going on.
Yeah.
So yeah.
As a kid, I never understood what was going on. But this game got recently like re-released on Steam, and a friend of mine who was quite nostalgic for it picked it up and we played it, and he really wanted to think it was good still, and he tried his darnest, so he played a bit. This game, I gotta tell you, is terrible. It has the same kind of thing as Digimon.
It's terrible.
It is terrible. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. This is a straight D tier. But it's got the same kind of thing as Digimon World. Yeah. Where... Was it World? Did we say that?
Yeah, Digimon World. Yeah. You mean like this more simmy kind of like look after your pet?
It's a simmy kind of thing where like you have it like at your ranch. You have one at a time, it's at your ranch, and you kind of like, you're feeding it. It has like a preference for what food it likes. You feed it, or you like let it take a nap, or you take it to like those like games those little obstacle courses, and it's like, I'll do the speed training course or the like, power training course, and they just like do it. You don't get to play it, you just see what happens. And so it's very simmy. You have one, it has a lifespan, eventually it dies, then you train a new one up. So it's got that same kind of like cycle. But the problem is that like you spend 80% of the game just sitting in menus, choosing stuff for like what to feed this like shitty mon. And some were like way better than others. Like some just outright suck and some are outright good. And like so you can end up with the one that's garbage. Yeah. And then so the only main gameplay you do is you take them to these like tournaments, and you start like in like the lower cups, and you can keep like rising to championship levels, and you fight, and you have like your moves, but they're not in a menu. They're like on the bottom of the screen, and you have to move your mon from left to right, and when you're above that move, that's the move you do. So like,
because it's based on distance. That's right. It's based on distance.
Yeah. So that is kind of a neat system. But, like, we typically just found that, like, the enemy might not have a close-up move, and they have to be in the same position you're in. So it's just a lot of tug-of-war of, like, get me to first spot so I can, like, use Lick with Suezo. But, like, my guy doesn't have Lick. He sucks. Or, like, you get really far away and, like, throw rocks, and they couldn't do anything. And, like, it's not fun. It feels weird to control. It's not super intuitive. I didn't think it was fun. And sitting in the menus of just choosing like speed training 60 times in a row, it's boring. And as a bias thing, I don't love the creature design as much.
That's interesting, because I was gonna say as my one, because everything you're saying is totally flashback to like how I'm remembering this game. And I remember I think the biggest detriment of this game is the amount of time spent in menus.
Yeah.
Because all these other games, the focus is on the creatures a lot of the time, or like exploring the world.
Yeah.
Whereas in Monster Rancher, it's so menu based.
Yes.
Everything's a menu, and you don't get enough face time with your creatures.
Yeah.
And so like that's the whole reason you're playing is the creatures. And I actually would disagree with you. I like the Monster Rancher creatures. I think I remember watching the anime kind of thing, and like, you know, Golem and Suezo and Hare.
Yeah.
I've got some nostalgia.
I like Mochi. I will say
Mochi.
the little Mochi guy, little froggy boys, the little hats.
Yeah.
Like they look kind of like those like the ducks in Spirited Away. They always got like the leaf on his head. Kind of looks like that. He's cute. I'm into him. Suezo kind of cool for like the gross weird factor. But I just remember so many times like fusing monsters. So that was the other thing you could do. You could fuse two together to get a new one, and it was like the same stupid harpy girl like 6 times in a row, but she'd be purple this time.
Well, that's the thing I was gonna say is like I love the creature design, but this game crutches so heavily on palette swaps. You'll have like Golem is cool. He's a big rock, like he's cool, but you can get a yellow one and a green one and a purple one. And it's like, there's not really that many different archetypes of the characters.
The variety was quite limited when you actually break down the designs. It's like, okay, there might be like 75 monsters in the game, but like that's actually 20 monsters, just they all have multiples.
Yeah.
So I think this is
you're saying D.
D-tier.
I think it's D tier as well. And now that I'm thinking about it, I want to make our first adjustment if that's okay with you. I think Digimon World 1 has to go to D as well.
Down into D as well.
And a lot of the argument we're making for Monster Rancher is the same thing. There's just too much downtime, and I almost think Digimon World 1 is actually worse.
Okay.
Because it has the same problem. It's better in the sense that there's more Digimon variety and there's a little bit less reliant on palette swaps. But the game is just so slower paced. Like one advantage of Monster Rancher with the menus is at least you can menu very quickly. Whereas in Digimon World, you're doing the same kind of training activities, but you have to run to each of these places. And it's like so long, and you have the PS1 kind of load times and everything. The text is slow, and it's just, I feel like that would be even more frustrating to go back and play.
You're right. That does sound like a nightmare.
Let's put those two, they can cuddle up together in D tier. And we'll move along to our next game, which I think is going to be another big one. Monster Sanctuary. Yeah. A game that we both played earlier this year. You can go back and listen to our archived episode on that in the Circles and Squares podcast playlist. But Monster Sanctuary. So this game is I would say this is another unique one too, because it's like a side-scrolling game, and there's actually, I wouldn't say it's a platformer, but there is like platforming elements, and you can ride certain creatures, use them to. It's kind of like a Paper Mario idea of like using them for abilities outside of battle and inside of battle. And it's the battles themselves are turn-based. It's 3-on-3, but it's like a side-on view of each other versus like you're across the stage from someone. I mean, top level thoughts on this one, I guess, is that it's a challenger for high in the list.
This game came out of nowhere and blew me away.
We both got extremely addicted to this.
I remember the funny part about this game coming out is I remember it was on Game Pass, and a couple of my friends started playing it. They're like, oh, it's so good, like you gotta play it. And I was like, no guys, like I don't have time for a creature capture game right now, like I'm so busy, I'm just not gonna play it, like stop telling me. And then one night I sat down and started playing, and then I binged the fuck out of this game and beat it.
Same with me. That's once I sat down at my computer and started this game, I don't think I really played much else.
So I will say this is just a good game in general. Like this is probably one of the strongest games I've played, and it's just got everything going for it. So first of all, the monster design, fantastic.
It's great pixel art too.
It is amazing pixel art. The creatures are so cool. Like Crystal Snail is one of my favorites.
Crystal Snail.
My favorite.
I always liked the bat the best was my favorite.
The bat.
He was so good.
There's like a mantis that's got like big like saw blades for like arms. He put in a lot of work for me. There's like a little cat with yarn. He's cute.
Yeah. There's just a lot of variety, and the typings are interesting too. There's like some robotic kind of guys you can and there is like a palette swap kind of system, but you actually shift your characters into sort of different versions of themselves, and it changes a lot mechanically. I would say
that's maybe the one downside, is that the monsters don't evolve traditionally. They kind of just are what they are. They do have they called it shifting to either light or dark, and that would give them like a little bit, it was more of a mechanic in terms of like changing their properties, but it did change how they looked as well a little bit. Like one of the ones my favorite was like there's like a green knight, and I wasn't a super big fan of him. He was sort of just a generic little like knight. He almost looked like out of Shovel Knight kind of thing, like a little green knight. But then when you white shifted him, he got the like lightning bolt, and it was like very much like Solaire from Dark Souls, and I was like, fuck, I gotta use this guy now.
Yeah. I think this game is really strong in a lot of ways. Like we praise Cyber Sleuth a lot for its ability to let you shift your party a lot and not have a lot of friction with like changing out which guys you're using. And this game is very much along those lines, I would say. And another thing that I think is unique about it in comparison to the rest of these games is usually when you level up your whatever monster, it learns whatever move at level 15 or level 16. But in this game, you get a skill tree with skill points to allocate. And so although you're still waiting to get those points and working your way down the tree, you can really customize your characters. You might have one that's got like a whole support kind of healing path, but if you already have a really good healer, you won't spec into that at all, and you could just use some offensive moves from it or something. And that level of flexibility I think is really cool, because this game does have PvP. And although I didn't play it, when you're playing PvP with these games, you can kind of predict what everyone's going to do. And in this game, I feel like there's a lot more like you build your creatures out to be kind of a version of them that you want. Yeah.
And there was a lot of cool synergies as well. Like I found there was like, you start the game out and it starts off pretty simple with what you have access to. But by the end, I was like, oh, I've made like a specific crit team. And so like, I always start out with this character that gives this buff. And then it's like, oh, if you've got 2 characters with this buff and something else happens, or like you can have a whole team that's like all of my birds get like a bonus and like have a bunch of birds on your team. And so there was a lot of like creative ways that you could build into. And I think maybe this is the one thing I could see people not liking about the game, is that it's a little bit less casual. Especially near the end, it starts to get relatively difficult.
Yeah, I think it's for sure the hardest game on this list so far.
And the thing is like you felt really rewarded for building these synergistic teams, but there was less of that ability to like, in Pokemon, for example, like we'll always go back to Pokemon, but like you could kind of just like put whomever you wanted and get through the game. Like you just have like, here are my 6 favorite Pokemon, I don't care if they go well together. My 6 favorites, and I'm gonna be fine. Whereas in
unless you love Zubat, Chansey, Paris.
But even still, like, I think you could still beat you could still beat the game. Like I beat Pokemon Fire Red with just a Sandshrew. You know, like you can do it. So in this game, like you really do have to like create a synergistic team. So there was times where like, oh, I like that guy, but like I can't put him on my team because he doesn't fit.
Yeah, and you can get really stuck if you don't have the right team. Like there was a couple boss fights in this game where you just didn't have the right alignment, and your team just wasn't prepared, and you'd get bodied by people in this game.
You absolutely would. So I think that's like it's a double-edged sword, because for some people that's a really big draw, because like they want to get a little more into like the gritty strategic element of it and like have that challenge. But some people, just they want to play and like just see the creatures and kind of get through it a little bit more casually. So it's a hit and a miss.
Yeah, and one other thing to go along with that too is it's not necessarily even the difficulty that I would say is my thing that I don't like as much about the complexity. Is it's like at a certain point there's so many sort of passive things that are going on with your team, where it's like, oh, if you every time you take damage, you passively shield this mom will shield your team, and anytime you get a debuff, it'll buff, and there's so many like if-then statements that end up being worked out that by the time you get to the kind of the last half of the game, there's so many sort of passive things happening in the battle that you begin to not really pay attention to it. There's just so much happening, you're kind of forgetting about it. It gets a little complicated. And I don't know if that's a great feeling, because it's almost too much. Like I feel like a little bit out of control at certain points.
Yeah, like it can be a little overwhelming, or even just like, oh god, the battle takes fucking forever because like I'm waiting for these like 17 things to trigger. But
yeah,
overall, like I love this game. I think the other thing that's really unique and stands out about this game is how the monsters get used out of battle as well. Like you alluded to earlier with some of the puzzle solving, but this game had a lot of like almost like Metroidvania style things where it's like,
it's like it's versions of HMs almost in a way.
Yeah, and so you'd get to somewhere and be like, oh, there's a platform, but I can't reach it, it's too high up. Or like, there's a switch that I need something heavy to put on it, or like I can't run fast enough to get across this bridge that collapses. And so every creature had a set ability that they used outside of battle. And you would often be like the puzzle solving. So like one of them, like some of them could fly, and so they would let you reach that higher place. Or like some of them be like they can make like big rocks to put down and like hold switches, and like you could ride them and you'd go faster so you could get across the bridge before it collapses. And so it was really cool coming up to these like, I guess like very pseudo puzzles or obstacles or whatever they were, and you could with the map like mark them, be like, I don't know how to solve this yet, I don't know how to get through that barrier. And then later on you'd get a monster's like, he can break walls. It's like, oh, that's how I get through it, perfect. And you'd bring the monster back to break the wall. And of course they all followed you around, which was the cool thing too. But it was just
that's
really
bonus points.
That's bonus points. That's worth like almost a tier in and of itself. But it was so cool just bringing them back and like really using the monsters to solve puzzles, and like they were more integrated in the game than just fighting.
That's a really strong point. Like this game doesn't really have a lot of negatives. I mean, okay, so we're talking S tier for this game, right? We're for sure talking S tier.
I love this game.
My argument on it would be this. I think it at its best, this game is better than Digimon Cyber Sleuth. But I think overall it's not quite there consistently because I mean, the biggest problem with this game, in my opinion, and we've talked about this before, is just the length of the battles, where you know you're going to win, but it's still going to take you 5 to 10 minutes because of the way the battles can get so drawn out. And I think part of it was my team building. I'm really into like the passive damage over time. I love poison. I did play defensive, but I didn't play I didn't have like all tanks relying on damage over time, you know, like I did have some power. But I felt like there was a lot of times where the battles I'd be like, okay, I've encountered these kind of enemies before. I know I'm going to win. I have an exact strategy I'm going to use. And it's going to work, but it's going to take me a little while. Yeah. And I know that's a problem with games like, I mean, all of these games have like type matchups, type charts. And a lot of it comes down to like use your super effective move. But with something like Pokemon, you just go in and you do a one hit kill and your battle's over. But for this game, you have to sit there even if you know the outcome, and it just takes a long time. And when you're kind of lost in one of the maps or trying to figure out a puzzle, or you're needing to, you know, get a few levels or something, it can be a little frustrating. Yeah. And especially some of the boss fights too. Like you'll be in like a 20-minute battle, and then you can lose it, and then you got to restart, and it's just a little discouraging, and
that's fair.
And it's a little, you know, inflexible in its time commitment. So you
think it's an S tier, but it goes behind Digimon?
I think it goes behind Digimon.
I think I can agree with that, because I think Monster Sanctuary is overall maybe a more solid game. But in terms of the creature capture, because Digimon has that constant of evolution as such a core mechanic, and Monster Sanctuary doesn't really have that. Like, to me, the evolving and seeing that, like, how exciting that is when you don't know what it's going to turn into, and then it becomes, like, a cooler version of itself. That was one thing I felt like Monster Sanctuary was lacking a little bit, was, like, I wish some of them evolved. Yeah. That would be cool.
Definitely. But,
so I can get on board. I think it's S tier, but behind Digimon, fine.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at with that one. Okay, so so our next game up is easily the best inclusion on the list. In terms of like, does it belong here? I don't know, but you put it on the list when we kind of threw this together. So we're talking about Neopets, everybody, because Neopets, there's creatures and you take care of them, you capture them. I mean, Neopets it's not even really a game. It's like an amalgamation of Flash games on a website that lets you earn points to feed to virtual pets. And the pets don't really have anything to do with it, other than that everything on the site is themed around the pets.
And they would get hungry, and if you didn't feed them, they would like become really gaunt. Like, they would never die, but they'd be like on their last legs, and like they could get hurt and have like bandages. They'd be like, please, I'm so hungry.
So Neopets, I mean, there's a lot of different animals. They're all kind of Flash art. This has been around forever.
Yes.
And I mean, you don't really capture the creatures, right? You kind of generate them and name them. You
generate them.
You can adopt them from the pound.
Yeah, you could go to the pound. People would release them. You go to the pound. And I always remember you'd sit there and sometimes like scroll it, because there would be some monsters that you can't generate. They're like too rare. You'd have to get like an egg or something like that.
Yeah, or like buy them from...
Or buy them.
Yeah.
They'd be so expensive. So you just like sit and like scroll the pound every now and again. You'd find one. You'd like furiously click on it, but it would be gone already.
Yeah. I remember that there was just some really quirky things. Like I really liked the world of Neopets back when I was a kid, you know, and how everything was themed after like, oh, it's not just playing... I always remember Meerkat Chase, right? Which is basically just a version of Snake. But in this game, you're playing as one of the pets, and balloons are like chasing after it. And I thought that theming of the world was cool, and I loved how you would go and click around the city and stuff. But I mean, looking back on it though, I mean, those are just nostalgia glasses, and there's not really anything going on with this game in terms of like interacting with your pets or catching them or really anything.
It's pretty weak, but it has pets, so you could name them. The other fun thing is you could like get those like paint brushes, and it would give them like different skins, and so some of them would be colors, but some of them were like kind of wild. Like this one's a strawberry now, or like... I
remember getting a Halloween paintbrush and changing. I had like a dragonfly, I forget his name, but he would turn into like a zombie dragonfly, and like it was pretty cool.
Or they had like Christmas ones where it's like, okay, he like the dog would get like antlers or something, like it was a deer, and like it was a really cute little like kids world. There's just a lot to do, right? And like you could join a guild with other people. You could like have a shop, and like you'd sell stuff, items you got, and like...
I mean, that's the strength of Neopets, if you wanted to try and argue that it goes up this list, is that it's more than just a singular game. It was actually like an online forum community, basically, with like these gamification elements added in to incentivize you to hang out on there. But I mean, that's not really what we're talking about on this list. I feel like Neopets has to be a D tier.
Oh,
do you think?
I wanted to put it as a C tier because I think like...
You want to put it here?
I don't think it's a great creature capture game, but I at least think it doesn't just dick around and waste your time like the D tier contenders do. I think it's like a shitty C tier.
Sure. I mean, I guess the benefit of it would be if you were to go play it, some of those Flash games are probably still fun. There's like some good word games on there, you know?
Yeah, I used to really like... It was like this haunted mansion you walked around in, and you had to constantly like make anagrams and figure out the word.
I think you're right. Like at least that would be... I would have fun playing that anagram game. I'm not sure I would have a lot of fun with either of the games in D, aside from like the first hour. I think I could go have an hour's worth of fun with Digimon World and just evolve a little bit, but I don't know.
But okay, very low C tier, I think, for Neopets.
Sounds good. Okay, next up, Nexomon. This is a game that is probably... If you've played Pokemon before, which is the reference we always keep going back to, is most well known, this game is probably the most alike Pokemon of anything on this list. I've not played a whole lot. This is actually a phone game that you found. And we both bought the full version. It was $1.44.
Yeah, it was.
Good deal. And you know what? It's not bad. It is very similar to Pokemon. You wake up in your bedroom, your mom is downstairs doing whatever, you go to the professor's lab, you get a thing, the Pokemon centers are like the same layout as a Pokemon center from Pokemon. This game knows what it's doing, right? And I don't know, like it's not bad. So, it's just not great.
I think it's very mediocre is the problem. I think it's very simplistic. It has a few quality of life things I actually really like, but I think overall it's just too simple. Like, for example, the grass when you go in, because again, it's just a Pokemon clone. So when you go in the grass, like some parts of the grass like will wiggle, like certain squares, and so that's where the encounters are. So it's really nice. Like if you don't want to fight, you can just totally skip through. Or if you do want to encounter a monster, you just immediately like walk to the wiggly part. So I think that's nice. It's also got a mechanic where when you have the same like party of 6 thing and then everything else goes in the box. But when you catch something new, it asks you if you want to put it in your team or put it in the box. And if you put in my team, then it's like, okay, who would you like to swap out for it? And then, so it's immediately there. You don't have to walk back to the center. That's kind of nice.
Yeah. That's something that the new modern Pokemon games do have, but... Yeah,
I guess they do. But the old ones didn't. I think that's good. Yeah. The other thing I really like about it is when you can have 4 moves just like Pokemon. They're all like typed. And when you get a new move, it like kind of unlocks in your move pool. And at any time you can go and select which 4 moves out of all of your moves you want to have, which is kind of cool. It's like you get a new move, you don't accidentally like, oh shit, it's not as good as my previous move, but like I've lost it now. So It has like a few nice little quality of life things, but overall I find it's just very, very simplistic. Like the monsters don't have like any passive abilities.
Yeah. They also don't have a lot of, I wouldn't say, thought put into like their backstory and why they're called something.
Yeah.
You know, like in a lot of these games, like Digimon and Pokemon, I think are the two more standout examples where it's like, well, this Digimon or whatever is based off of this mythos in Japanese history, and like, you know, and this game, I feel like the designs of the creatures are kind of cool. Like I like the pixel art, but it's just kind of like a name and a creature, and the name's a pun on how it looks. And then when you go into your decks or you go into your description of that mon, you can't really learn about it.
Any
or like there's nothing
yeah.
there's nothing really to learn about, and so it feels like it's like on the surface looks a lot like Pokemon, but when you dig into what it's offering, it's a lot more surface level.
Yeah, exactly. And even too, like my biggest pet peeve with the game is you get a new move and it gives you like a little description. It's like, oh, like a supercharged lightning attack, and it like costs like 12 SP and doesn't tell you how much damage it does, like any kind of information about like how strong the move is. The only thing you can go off is like, well, it's probably better than the one that costs 8, so I guess I'll use it.
Yeah.
But like it's really not clear on information in terms of like what the moves are actually gonna do in battle. And like there isn't and if you get like a status condition, there isn't a way to like tell what it does. It's just a little icon. And so I think like it has some cute ideas and some good design, and for $1.44 it's not a bad phone game, but it's just, aside from exciting to see what the monsters are and what they evolve into, it's kind of boring.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It's just a very light version of what if you want to play Pokemon, but Pokemon itself is pretty light in a lot of ways, especially if you're familiar with it. So I don't know if it gains a lot of points for that. I don't think it gains a lot of points for the art style. You know, like I like the pixel art of the Mons, but I wouldn't say the world looks great. You know, it kind of has that
like,
game maker sort of look to it. The controls, of course, like you're playing with your touchscreen. That's not our preference, of course. I don't think I love it. But it's not bad. It's just very generic. I think this game, having played not a lot, I would probably put it ahead of the Chaos.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Like in top of C tier, right?
Yeah, I agree.
That's what I think. I mean, I would maybe even by the end of the list potentially put it like end of B. If B is neutral, because it's like, you know, good or great, good, neutral, bad, awful is what that's how I kind of envision it. Who knows? But I think it could go here for now.
I think so. I think that's fair.
All right. We're over to your specialty here. I've never played Ni no Kuni, but Ni no Kuni, take it away.
Wrath of the White Witch. So this game is fucking dope. This is a cool game.
As I've heard it, I've always meant to play it, and I never have.
It is a very good game. It's on Game Pass now, so you should play it.
Yeah, so's everything though.
But anyway, this is again a very different one because it's very much more of like a JRPG, but it's like the kind of like Final Fantasy style one where you're like you run around and it's like the matches aren't turn-based. They're like more action focused and you can choose moves to do.
Right.
But you're also like running around the battle.
Right, okay. So it's kind of like a Tales of Symphonia?
Yeah, it's exactly like a Tales of Symphonia kind of thing. So this is a delightful world. All of the monsters look amazing because the art in this game is done by Studio Ghibli.
Right.
So it fucking looks incredible. All the monsters are just like the most charming, whimsical, adorable things. And the way that you catch them is like you find them in the overworld, they're running around, and you run into them, start a battle. If you beat them, you can get them on your team. You get like a starter guy that you get, and he's like the ultimate like underdog. He's this like tiny little like shitty guy who can hardly do anything, but like when he levels up, he gets like a little sword and a shield, and he's like gonna be a knight, and he gets better and better. And I just love this game. Like it's been a while since I played it. You have like a certain amount that you can bring with you on your team, and then you get other people. So you're this like young little boy that's been transported this fantasy world basically. And then you meet characters, they join your team. So you have a party of 3 like human people who you can also be in the battles and control. Like they have like magic or whatever. Right. But then
so you're fighting along with your creatures.
Yeah, so you have those, and then you get to assign creatures to each person, and each person you have has like an affinity for like, I'm really good with this type of monster, so like put them there, and then like I'm really good with this this other type says like, okay, he can have that one. And at any point in the battle, you can choose to swap out to be the monster, which all have their own moves as well. And like, there's a little bit of like a type charting where they're like super good against whatever, or like one's a good healer, so you'll swap out, do some healing, then swap to someone else.
But it's definitely integral that you have creatures.
It's
like
definitely,
you can't just you couldn't just be like, well, I'm just going to use my characters to fight.
No, the creatures are who you use the majority of the time, I think, or at least like 50% of it. Like they are very integral to the way the battle works, and you often will like type swap out or like so. They're really cool. And then what's neat about it as well is that they evolve, but they have the amazing system of the branching path evolution. So you start out with like a tiger, for example. He's one of the ones I remember catching. He's this funny tiger and he's always like sneezing. That's his thing. He's a sneezy tiger. And he's got bad allergies. And he evolves. You can choose him like one or the other way, but in one way we chose him, he becomes like a bit of like a brawler, and he like starts to wear jeans or something. It's so weird. We're like, gotta take the one with jeans. And so like you get to pick, and then I think each monster evolves twice. The first time you pick the path, and then at the end, like the last one is like just follows that path. And then we had another cat, and he had a sword, and we like made him into a pirate, and he had like a fencing sword.
So the creatures are pretty cool.
My creatures are very cool. Like they're just cute ideas. It's usually like animal plus some kind of archetype.
Yeah. But with the Ghibli style art,
but
it's very nice.
With the art, like it's just gorgeous to look at. They are a delight.
Okay, so it's a great game, but as a creature catching game, like what are you thinking for the tiers?
I really like this game. I think the problem is we have a lot of S tier picks right now.
You think an A? Maybe it could be an A tier?
And so I'm thinking it might be like a really solid A because the creatures are a big part of the game, but they're not the main focus, right? Like it's an RPG first, and if in theory you could just use the human characters for like a decent part of the battle, but one of the best parts was definitely like building this team of creatures.
Yeah, and it seems to be involved enough that you're like customizing it. You can swap them around.
You could like feed them food that they like to like boost their stats, and then you could give them items that synergize with them, and like it was definitely a decent part of the game. It's just that the game was a lot larger than just that. It was like kind of like a JRPG first and a creature capture like thrown in, integrated well enough that it was part of the game, but still like the game would function without it. I think. All
right, I'm cool with Ni no Kuni and A. It sounds good.
I think you should play it. It's such it is such a charming game. Like it's one of those games where like you just can't help but have the biggest smile on your face because it's just it's like stepping into a Ghibli movie the whole time. It's amazing.
And that is lovely. All right. Speaking of games that are not necessarily creature catching, I guess it is. It's Persona. It's Persona. Everybody, Persona is making an appearance. We put, I guess it's really Persona 4 and 5 because those are the ones that we've explored and played with.
We'll call it 5.
We got 5 as the picture for the list, but so Persona 5. I mean, the game is great. We've talked about it a lot. It's an S tier game, no doubt about it. But in terms of the creature catching, I'm like breaking that part out and ranking it on this list. I personally don't think Persona is that high on a creature catching tier list ranking, and for a few reasons. Number one is, although one of the benefits of Persona is it's really easy to get, swap your personas out and you don't get locked into having one team, I think that there's just something about the way that you do that so often where you have like no connection with your personas. Like they're just like ways to move.
It's even like the joke. Like you start out with Arsene is like your personal.
Yeah, you don't even play him.
Persona, and it's like you get rid of him within the first like half hour. You don't see him again. At the very end of the game, it's like, oh, we will defeat this evil. Like me and Arsene is the only one that can help me. It's like, what the fuck's Arsene been for the last 120 hours?
Exactly. The creatures are more just like your move sets.
Yeah.
They're not really like
because
important.
in battle, you bring them with you. You can have like 6 equip or whatever. Yeah. And you bring them with you into battle, but like it's still Joker that's in the battle. It's just when you use a move, the persona comes out and does the move. And it always looks really cool. Like it is neat to have like, like the unicorn show up to do something, or like various other like creatures, and they do their one ability and then they like go like back within you.
Yeah, they look cool. The designs are pretty cool. You know, there's some really weird and zany.
Yeah,
and,
there's that, you know.
There's a giant penis monster, but at the same time, like the designs are interesting. They're kind of grotesque and like not just like that's a bad word to use after using that example, but even like, you know, there's just a lot of things you wouldn't see in these other games.
There's that one, it's like the devil and he's like sitting on a toilet.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, just really zany stuff, right? And
Yeah.
I think it could earn some points for that. I think the characters are like they're well designed. They're just not overly memorable because you don't spend a lot of time with the creatures.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like there's a whole fusion system, but it's not really that interesting. It doesn't. The creatures don't look like a fused version of each other. They just fuse into something else.
What I will say about it though is that to back off of Nexomon in the weirdest comparison ever made of Persona 5 and Nexomon.
Never thought I'd hear those.
We complained Nexomon didn't really have a dex and you didn't really get to know about them. But one of the things is Persona, it was actually one of the games where out of any of the ones on this list that I actually wanted to complete the dex the most.
Really?
And the reason for that is because all of them had a really interesting, like, they're usually based on some kind of like mythology. And so it was really cool. I enjoyed going through and reading every single time I got one, like, what is this? What is it based on? And a lot of it was like Japanese mythology, but there was like Egyptian mythology in there as well. And there were various different like pantheons and places where they'd come from. And I had such a good time. Like, it was less of like a dex of like, oh, it's based on this, but like this is how it works in this world. And it was more just like, here's a little like Wikipedia article about like, you know, like a folklore. And I thought that was so cool.
That is really cool. And I think Persona again has a unique mechanic in something that it does in the way that you actually capture the creatures, because unlike the other games where you get like a Pokeball or like a trap or something, in Persona you can, I mean, you do, I guess, trap them in a way, but you also can get them by having a conversation with them. Like, you can weaken them enough and they'll like beg you for mercy, and then you have to negotiate with them, and you can negotiate. The creature will give you some money, or you'll let it go, or like, oh, you know, you should join my team. I think that like having a dialogue with the characters and getting to negotiate that kind of contract is unique. And it's, I don't know if I love doing it, but I think it earns uniqueness points, you know. The conversations, whether or not they're fun, I don't know if that's a good thing, but it's unique.
Yeah, they were also just really weird sometimes. Like, they almost kind of had like, each monster had like an affinity of them. Like, they were like a really confident monster, or they were like, you know, like a bashful monster. They had like an attribute. And then, like, each type attribute would respond differently to your questioning. So it's like, for the bashful ones, you have to be, like, really, like, assertive or something. And so you'd pick, like, out of the 3 dialogue options, like, which one's the most assertive? And then I'll get it. But I think, like, I always just had, like, a chart up of, like, what kind of response. Like, it doesn't tell you exactly what response to pick, but it tells you, like, oh, for that monster, you want to be, like, shy. And so, like, okay, what's the shyest response? And, like, so that was almost kind of fun in the weird way of, like, almost like it's like a puzzle of like,
I think the concept is more fun than doing it in practice though, especially when you're, you know, the necessity of a guide like that isn't great.
Yes, that's true.
I don't know. I think Persona, like, obviously the best game of any of the games on this list, like, hands down, but as a creature capturing game, I think it's another C.
Really? You
or
think
a D,
it's
or
that
an end
low?
of B. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think I could, in the right mind of a creature capturing game, and this is my favorite game ever, everybody.
Yeah.
But I don't think I can put it above Bugsnax, because Bugsnax is like, you're on a safari, you know, like you're like planning out, like, okay, I need to scare this guy so it runs over to this bush, and then I can set a trap in this bush and it won't be expecting
That's
it.
true.
You know, it's really
That's true.
great.
It is pretty minimal in the creatures. I guess the problem is that everybody has their own unique persona, like all the other characters, and that's so fucking cool. And you have yours in Arsene, but then you catch all the other ones because you have the ability to use like any persona, which is cool. But like you said, they really are kind of like flavor. They take a back seat. I would say I don't think they can go lower than B, because they hit so many other boxes, like design being amazing.
That's true.
It's really cool how you have like a few in your party, and so you can swap at any time and like use one monster's healing and then swap back for like a damage for the other one. Yeah. And it's
also really cool how the other characters in your party, they all have their own persona that comes with them, and when you max out your relationship, their persona will evolve into like its final form or something. And although that happens, that's very near the end of the game, like you won't see it for like 80 hours or something, but it is a cool payoff, which I think is worth mentioning in terms of a bonus for this game. But I think overall though, like I personally don't think it can get a lot higher, just because it's
that's
of the reasons
fair.
we've said.
I think B is reasonable because it has some solid parts to it, but it's also like very minimal in terms of like how much the creatures actually like matter. So I think B is fair because like there's nothing negative about it. I don't think any of the parts like don't work. They're just not really like exceptional standouts.
Yeah, I think you're right. So B tier for Persona. We've got 3 very interesting games left, everybody. We have so I guess we got Pokemon is up next for us. And we've divided Pokemon up just because it is such a big franchise, and we've easily played, like we've played all the generations combined, and you know, we've got the most to say about it. So we thought we would divide Pokemon into DS and previous and 3DS and newer. So I guess that would be like Diamond and Pearl down to Gen 1. Yellow and Blue would be first. We can start with Gen 1.
Okay.
This is a contentious one for me.
Yeah.
Gen 1 Pokemon, because this is where it all started. Like this is so OG, and I'm sure there's some other creature game before, but like this is
what blew
This
up.
is what started the genre, right? Like Pokemon Red and Blue and all those. And it's interesting because these are easily the oldest games on the list. Like these are black and white GBA games, you know, really early on, and then all the way up to the DS version. I think these should rank decently high, the original Pokemon games, and they do have their flaws, you know, and it's hard to talk about one in particular because we're ranking such a range, like literally from the 90s up until like the early 2010s. But I feel like this era of Pokemon in general was fairly strong, you know. It had the Pokemon flaws of like the battle system's fairly rudimentary once you understand it, you know. Introducing it to someone who's playing for the first time, it'll be like us remembering the Temtem type chart. Yeah. But now we have such a good working knowledge, like the game becomes really kind of paint by the numbers in terms of difficulty and stuff. But I just think back to those early generations of Pokemon, and the worlds were, you know, big, and they had some things to do in there. Like, I remember going to the Sleuth building and killing all the scientists Pokemon and stuff, and exploring the rocket hideouts and saving the, you know, broadcasting station from Team Rocket being taken over and stuff like that. And just, you know, getting to Gen 3 for the first time in color and taking on the going across the water on that ferry. Yeah. And just having all those type of experiences, you know. And I think these games were, for the time, maybe they haven't aged so great, especially like, you know, the old Pokemon, you're so hamstrung by needing your team to be HM compatible and all this stuff. But I just think back to the bonuses of these games, and I think that there's so much strength in what they had, especially for the time when they were released.
I think, yeah, you're 100% right. Like, there was a reason these games were massive, right? There was a reason we had like Pokemon bed sheets and like Pokemon on our birthday cakes every year and like all that shit. And they're just so good. And even now, like to this day, I still get like so nostalgic, and like every now and again I'm like, man, like I wish I was playing Pokemon. And yeah, they're strong. And the other thing too is I think some of the best mechanics that are in Pokemon even to this day came out in these early ones. Like I don't know how much they've really added in the last few iterations that like make it that much more exciting. Because like in Gen 3, if I believe correctly, that's when we first got like the passive abilities, which is a really big thing. And like held items, so you could have like the berries that you'd eat for like a one-time effect, or you'd give them like an item that does something like the quick claw, like every now and again they just get to go first even if they're slow. And like that really, like, I think did a lot for the competitive or like the more like strategic side of it. Definitely. So I think like kind of some of the best ideas that Pokemon ever had like came out in these early games as well. Yeah, I agree. And you know, I keep going back to just those exciting moments. I'll always remember like the best moment ever in Pokemon is when you're playing Gold and Silver and you beat the Elite Four, and then you go through that cave and where are you? You're back on the map from the first game, and you're like back where you
I mean, you would have just played Red and Blue a couple years before, and then you go back and you're like, holy shit, I get to go through this entire league again. But it's like from a different place, and your Pokemon are already strong from being the first league, and it's like a new challenge. Like that is just an unbeatable moment in these type of games.
That was such an unexpected like celebration of what had come before, and oh man, it's so good. And you can't, obviously you gotta talk about the designs as well. Like Pokemon has some of the best creature design. Like you just cannot top it.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
And I think as well, there's actually some really good like illustrations I've seen of people like breaking down how the art style has changed over time. And one of the things that artists have detailed and explained to me just so that I understand why I like the older designs better than the newer designs is that they were a lot like rougher before. So if you look like Pidgey and like Spearow have like very ruffled fur and their claws, like they actually have like talons on their feet, right? And like Growlithe's like the same, he's got like, you know,
right,
like
that
texture,
shaggy sort of fur,
shaggy textured fur, whereas you look and like Krabby's got like harsh lines on his like claws and on his feet. And if you look at the newer Pokemon now, they're very like soft and rounded, right? Like Crabrawler has like, I mean, I guess he's supposed to have like little boxing gloves, but even his feet like go to nice round points. They're not like pointy toes, and like the birds at the same of like
so specific.
Nice like round beaks, and everything's got like a big round head. And if you look at new Pokemon now, like everything's circles and ovals. Wow. And it's gotten a lot like softer and cuter. And like I totally understand why other people like that, but for me, I much preferred the like more jaggedy kind of like rough and tumble designs from the first couple generations. I agree with what you're saying, and I think Pokemon too in general, and this is just I guess it's for the whole series. I think Pokemon just has, it's one of the best fictional worlds, period. You know, regardless of even removing the game mechanics for a second and what you're actually doing, like the world is just incredible. It's one of the greatest fictional worlds. You know, just imagine everyone wants to live in a Pokemon world. You know, who wouldn't want to live in that world? It's just, you know, even if you're playing one of these games and you're just like, oh, I'm just going through this route and there's 15 fishermen, they're all going to use water types, and I'm just going to use lightning, you know, lightning Pokemon or something. It's still, at the end of the day, it's still enjoyable to be like traveling down Route 13 and just seeing what you come across, just because of the world and the land that you're on. And so these games, I mean, I don't think they aged great. You know, some of the older ones, they're slow. The XP bars would take forever. There's the whole problem where the physical and special stat splits didn't happen on the early games, and it makes it very difficult to go back and, you know, you really can break some of the older games by using certain Pokemon. But I think that these games, recognizing their warts and their age, are still good. Yeah, I would put it, what do you think about an A tier for these
I was
games?
thinking A.
Yeah.
I was thinking potentially even ahead of Ni no Kuni, just because I haven't played it, and because of just I think the strength of like specifically Gen 2 and 3 are phenomenal games. You know, I think the Gen 1 games, they are a little bit aged at this point. I think the Gen 4 games, the first one on the DS, are a little bit like they're learning a new technology in a way, and it was very slow, and like I remember like a lot of load times and a lot of like kind of weird touchscreen stuff with like going in that mine. Maybe it wasn't the greatest, but like Gen 2 and 3 are aces, man.
I agree.
Those games are great.
I agree. I think A is that's exactly where I put it. I'm happy with that.
Good. Okay. Because let's move into the modern Pokemon games, which are a lot more contentious, and you know, like all the things that we said about Pokemon we just said about Pokemon in talking about the Gen 1 is like a lot of those things are still true in the modern games. But I think the difference when we're talking about the modern games is, number one, the Pokemon company itself is just so frustrating because they make more money than like any other game company, and they could do a lot more with this franchise, but they don't. And although the earlier games, I think we would give a pass for being like trailblazers and sort of, you know, hitting those highs at the start, the fact that the, you know, Sword and Shield specifically and like, you know, X and Y are still so similar. I think that this division is where the point is like, no, you know, like now we're expecting more as like a mature audience of this franchise that you're no longer providing in terms of like what we want, you know?
Yeah, and I think there's also just that disconnect of like, and it's a shame because it's tough to judge is it fair to judge a game's quality based on the things that aren't in it?
Yeah. And I would say no.
And say no, but at the same time, like, there is that context, right? Of like, you know, maybe they should be, or like they could have done more. And so, you know, it's not necessarily fair to judge a game like that, but at the same time, it's not fair to judge it against other games that don't have like millions of dollars of budget, but still manage to, you know, put more things in.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, even if we're taking that argument out of it, like, you know, for Persona, where the game itself is clearly better than all these games, but as a creature catching game, it is, you know, we put it in B. I still think that these games are, as a creature catching game, you know, as the primary thing, but there's still other things going on. I still think these games are overall weaker than the originals in terms of the catching too. Like, I don't know, it's just something about the game is just not innovative in comparison to what it used to be. You know, we've given a lot of praise to games like, you know, Cyber Sleuth, or like Bugsnax, for like giving you Bugsnax, you catch, you're literally on a safari. You know, Persona, you're negotiating. In these games, it's not that the way you catch Pokemon in Pokemon is bad. It's just that there's been no innovation to it, basically. And I don't know if you can lose points for that, but at the same time, it's like, I don't think I could also rate it the same as the original Pokemon games.
You can't. You got to take it within the context it's in.
I mean,
with
Arceus, the other game, I think it's probably included in modern Pokemon. Like, that game, I think, does earn some points for being like, no, your trainer's running around the world. You're throwing Pokeballs at Pokemon. Like, that is unique. I think it earns some points for that.
That is definitely unique and different, but the other games don't have that. And it's hard to judge it on this list because I feel like jaded by the company just in general and what's been coming out. And I wish I had a new version of Gen 2 and 3, and I don't feel like that's what the games are anymore. But it's still Pokemon, so it's this weird, like, I almost can't wrap my head around how I feel about Pokemon sometimes. So it really depends on the day.
It's the biggest love-hate thing, but I think something you said earlier is another thing too, is like the designs are not as strong anymore. Yeah. I don't know, like, and that's just our opinion. Like,
that I agree. I think that's the biggest thing I can latch onto for like a tangible reason to put it lower, is that I don't like the designs as much. I find them looking a lot more generic than they used to. Like, I feel like Pokemon used to be very unique looking, and now it kind of looks like some of the designs that come out almost look like they would be like a Nexomon, like a Pokemon rip-off design, but it's an actual
I agree with you. I think, but the only thing I would say is like the games, there's so many more games trying to do what Pokemon's doing. So are the designs of Pokemon getting worse, or are the other games just making it seem more standard?
Yeah, it's maybe a bit of both. I don't know about that. But like, I really do think like you can see the way the art has changed over time. It's become a lot more unified.
Yes, it has.
They look so similar, and like, I remember there's certain mons, it's like, I think I really would have liked that, but it's like, I think of like Yamper from Sword and Shield, like, oh, it's like an electric corgi, that's so cool, and he's a fucking oval. Like, they don't even have, a lot of them don't even have toes anymore. Yeah, like, they don't even have like the distinction line of toes. It's just like a little like oval. If you actually like break down the parts, it's like, you know, when you do those like learn to draw books, and it's like, here's step 1, like draw the circles, here's step 2, like give it the detail, here's step 4, like more detail, but they like didn't do step 4, they just did the first 3 steps. And we're like, that's a dog. And it is a dog, you can see it, and it's cute because it's a dog, but like, you know, he doesn't really look like a real dog anymore. He looks like a cartoon version of a dog.
And like, that's fine, like, you know, but I think it's just not as great as the original, is what we're saying.
they just don't stand out as being so unique to me anymore, I think. And like, some of them are great, like some of them are still amazing design ideas, like that new giraffe rig that came out where it's like tails on his head now, like I fucking love that.
I really love Centiskorch too from Sword and Shield. Like, that fire centipede guy was wicked. Really cool.
So cool. They have great ideas. Like, we've had like Appleton is one of my favorites. He's the little apple, and he's like a dragon hiding in the apple, and then you can evolve him either into like Flapple, where he like breaks out and he's flying, or you can make him like a really like depressed pie. Like, depressed pie is one of my favorite Pokemon. It's so cool. And they still have these like bomb diggity like killer ideas, but then they also just have like a lot of like just kind of, you know, like really forgettable things.
And I think another portion too is like the it's not just about how you catch them. Like we gave points to, Bugsnax persona, like we said, for unique kind of ways to catch. But I think one area too where Pokemon kind of loses some points, or like the modern Pokemon, is I don't think the battle system has been evolved and iterated a lot. Like they added things like Z moves, or you can Gigantamax your Pokemon, but it just makes them bigger and they have the same moves. Whereas I think a lot of these other games, like think about Fae Tactics, like you're using a turn-based combat kind of thing, and there just seems to be more evolution or like different takes, whereas Pokemon is so safe. But then again, we get this thing of like, are we now debating about the quality of the Pokemon games, or like as a creature catching game?
What I would say about, I like Mega Evolutions. I thought Mega Evolutions were super cool when they came out. I actually dislike stuff like Z moves.
So do I.
And things like Gigantamax. I actually think it's worse because all it boils down to is like, sure, it's maybe like a fun cinematic to watch a couple times, but then it just turns into like free one-hit KO move. And you just, there's not really, it doesn't add anything to the battle. It's just like, I'll Gigantamax them and now he's just like bullshit strong. So you either like steamroll anyone who doesn't Gigantamax, or you're fighting like a gym trainer. The gym trainer Gigantamax, you're like, I guess I'll do it too. And now it's like nothing happened because you're both Gigantamaxed.
Yeah.
So like, it's just like weird fluff. Like I will say, and we can't count this because the new games Scarlet and Violet are not out yet, so we can't count it.
Can't be counted.
But I will say the Crystal one actually looks like the first one that's interesting again because it changes type.
That's true.
And being able to change your creature's typing sounds actually very interesting.
Yeah.
But it's not out yet, so it doesn't count. The other ones are all bullshit.
But even then, still too, I would say like with that crystal evolution, whatever it's called, from what we've seen, and again, this is speculation. And the same with Gigantamax too. Is it's like any Pokemon can do it to us. I think anyone can Gigantamax. They can't all Ultimax or whatever.
Yeah.
There's two versions.
Yeah.
But that's the problem, is like certain special treatment is given to certain Pokemon over other ones.
Hey, Charizard, what's up?
but in what's that game? Monster Sanctuary, if you're shifting your mon from like dark to light, every mon is given the same treatment. They can all go dark, they can all be light. Yeah. Whereas in Pokemon, they give really preferential treatment to the ones that they know are like the fan favorites.
Yeah, you're just jerking off Gen 1 forever.
Yeah. And that's fine to a certain extent, but it also shows like the same level of care isn't given to the whole roster, And
the other thing about the shifting in Monster Sanctuary is that it's not just shift to have direct upgrade. There's literally no reason not to shift. It's shift to two different options that are just like better at something, or like to diversify more than anything else.
And in Pokemon, if you Mega Evolve, you're just better. There's no thinking. Better. You just have to do it. So, benefit though, another one I just thought of, Sword and Shield does gain points, or like above does gain points, because they added in fairy types.
Fairy types is cool.
And they reworked some of the type charts. So like, Steel is a lot better now and Poison is a lot better now.
Yeah.
I think Pokemon's in a lot better spot for like the type balancing now. That's like, that is a benefit of the newer games.
But then they removed a bunch of Pokemon as well. So, I think this could go the top of B.
I think you're right in terms of like, this type of list.
Pokemon is still a behemoth, but it doesn't have the same magic that early Pokemon does, and I hope it comes back.
I hope so too.
I hope so.
All right. For anyone that enjoyed us talking about that and wants us to talk about it not in a tier list version, we did a whole Pokemon spoiler cast a couple of years ago. It's a great episode. You could find it on our channel. But anyway, Temtem is the last game we have to talk about on the list today, which is, this one's been around for a while now too. It's kind of been in early access we bought it a couple of years ago, and I just started playing it again last night in preparation for this. Temtem, we said it about Nexomon. Temtem is like Nexomon, is very similar to Pokemon in terms of its setup. Like you're a young kid from a town and you go out and you do your thing, but it's nowhere near as much of like a blatant, I don't know if Nexomon's a ripoff, but you know what I mean. This game has a lot going for it in unique term. Like every battle's 2-on-2. The mechanics are similar to Pokemon, but kind of different. Like you have an MP bar and every move's worth a different amount. So instead of having like 10 tackles, you have 20 points, and every tackle costs 7, and so you're budgeting like these points you have for different moves in your move slots. I think it's modern take on Pokemon that's not Pokemon, but it is, and it's improved a lot on what Pokemon struggles with.
I think Temtem, from a mechanical standpoint, is by far the most solid game on this list. Like, the way they've actually done the battles is phenomenally smart. Like, having it always be 2v2, I think is just good in general, because that adds so much more like strategy and like synergy between the two.
And it solves that problem of, oh, I'm just going to fight this guy and send out my one super effective mon and click my move. Because now you have like, well, what if I send my super effective mon out, but it's not good against both, and it's actually weak to this other one that the trainer's using. So I got to like plan my guys out a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got that already as a strong part. And the MP system and how the moves work is just so clever, because one of the things about, and not to rag on Pokemon, but it's just the direct example.
Well, and Digimon's the same way.
Digimon, Digimon's the same way, you're right. So normally how it works is you have your 4 moves you can choose from, and like, okay, I've got like a neutral typing move. I've got like maybe like a status move, like a sleep, whatever. And then I've got like my electric move, because I'm an electric type. And then you level up, you get a new electric move, and it's like, okay, the old electric move had 50 base power. This one has 60. So why would you ever use the 50? Just, it's a direct upgrade. There's no thinking required. Just, it's better, use it. Whereas in Temtem, because everything costs a certain amount of mana, you don't necessarily think that because the move is stronger, it's better to put on your character's like potential team, because maybe it's a really strong move, but it costs like half of your mana reserve. So like, is it worth it to like bust out of the gate with that? Or do you, because if you run out of mana, you can't do anything. You have to take a turn to rest and recover.
Well, you can go over your mana pool, but if you use a move but you don't have enough mana left, it actually takes away your HP.
That's right. That's actually a cool system too. So you have to navigate that, and so like a move might be weaker, but it might also be cheaper, so it's good to keep. And then the other thing I think some moves also are like turn timers for them. So it's like a turn 2 move, and so you can't actually use it on your first turn. You have to wait to the second turn before it unlocks, and then if you use that move, it goes on cooldown again for 2 turns. So the game kind of like naturally balances out. The moves all like have value, because even if it's weaker, it might be like a cheap, just like, okay, they're low, I'll just tackle them quickly, they'll die. Or it's like, you know, maybe I want the really strong heavy hitting move I can only use once, but it's such a good like opener, and then I'll swap out. And so you're really like strategizing between like, there's a choice every time you go into a battle, instead of a lot of these other turn-based games where it's like, I use this move every time because it's my best move, and like I can just autopilot through it all.
Exactly. And I think that makes all the difference in terms of how you're playing. And even if you are in Temtem to run into, like I did a battle last night, and it's like, okay, well, this guy has 3 mons and they're all weak to this type that I have. But even if you have a mon of that type, you're not going to get through the whole battle without running out of your MP. And so, you know, that adds a whole nother layer of the strategy, because unlike Pokemon, you can actually click pass turn, because every time you don't attack, you restore a certain amount of your MP. So you can actually pass and like not want to do anything to restore it back, or you can switch out and it'll restore passively while they're not actively in the battle too. So even if you have that super effective mon, you literally can't just use it to beat that battle. You have to switch, or you have to crutch on other strategies as well. And I think they've unlocked the key to making the battle system more thoughtful. Which is fantastic.
Exactly. And it's not that it's like, but it's also not too complicated. Like once you understand the system, like they're not extreme, like you're not like playing 4D chess where you have to have like 6 turns prepared in a row. It's very simple what you do on each turn, but it's just that extra level of like, you're always kind of thinking about it. It's never autopilot through a battle. It's like, okay, I'll use this move. Okay, now I've got this much MP. All right, I guess I'll swap. Like you're just making these little micro adjustments and making like a choice per turn.
That's right.
And it's like, for me, that perfect balance of like, it's engaging, but it's not like stressful strategy.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's well done as well. Like the game doesn't have any of that old school design BS that is like, oh, well, you know, you used up half your MP, so the next time you start a battle, you start with half MP. Like it just gives it to you back. Your health doesn't come back, but you can, I mean, that's the same as Pokemon, I guess. It might be kind of nice if it was to come back. Like Monster Sanctuary has that, where you're healed after every battle. But I mean, I still think it's such an improvement, and it makes you like think, and you're not just going to replace with the better move, like you said. It's great. I think Temtem isn't the strongest in the creature design for me. I think they look fine, but they look sort of just like an upgraded or very high quality. I don't want to say flash, but like they do look kind of gummy or like rounded and simple, sort of like you were describing the newer Pokemon, you know, like I think Digimon and Monster Sanctuary and Pokemon, like I would take the creatures in all of those probably over this. And the other thing about the creatures too, which I think is one of my biggest negatives, is this game's actually an MMO as well.
Yes.
So you're playing online, and that inherently is not a negative. Like you don't have to interact with any of the MMO stuff. You don't have to trade with people. You don't have to battle people if you don't want. But you do see people running around your world online, and it is what it is. Like it kind of is distracting sometimes if you're in a busy spot. But the part I really dislike about it is that as you know, one of the best parts of these kind of games is seeing, oh, what's the evolution going to be? You know, what's my guy going to turn into? And because you're seeing all these other people running around in the world, you know, I've already ruined what all the evolutions of like half my guys are going to be, because you've seen someone run by with a better version, and it takes away that mystery of like, oh, what will my starter look like when he levels up?
That's true. I think sometimes there's a cool moment of like you see someone who's like way over leveled for like where they are, and they come by with like some outrageous looking monster. You're like, holy shit, like what is that? Like I wonder when I'll see it. So like it can be cool, but I agree, like just the amount of people you see, and like especially when they're like kind of in the same area as you, and so they have similar creatures that they've had access to, and like but they've happened to evolve theirs. It is kind of like a bit of a it takes a little bit of the wind out of your sails.
I think the more of the game that I play, I will grow to like it, because I'll have seen like the roster, you know, like in Pokemon that would be cool because I know all of them. But in Temtem, when I'm still like, I'm literally meeting all these guys for the first time when I meet them in the grass.
Hello.
Hello, like I was shaking their hand. I've already seen so many from the other trainers. And so that's a negative. The other negative, like I just mentioned, the grass. Holy shit. This game, the encounter rate is so high. And, you know, after playing, Dragon Quest and some more modern RPGs, even the more modern Pokemon where they're actually roaming on the map, or even something like Nexomon where you're going through the grass and the wiggling grass is the one that's going to have Mons, going back to playing something which is like random encounters in the grass is so frustrating when you're just trying to get somewhere. And especially in this game when you can literally like not even finish your walking animation, like one step, and you just come out of a battle and you're instantly into another one with like these really high encounter rates. It just feels like really annoying to have to run from all these fights if you're trying to get somewhere. I wish this game had taken that one more modern step in terms of like Mons on the field, so you can run around them, or you can see what it's going to be if you want to fight it or if you choose to go around it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair complaint. I say that would be my biggest complaint for Temtem. I don't necessarily have the same problems otherwise. Like I kind of like seeing other people's creatures, and I think it's just cool that the monsters follow you in general. Like that's just like bonus. That's huge. And I actually like the creature design. It's very like, it's kind of neat. I would say it's like very nature based, like they're very animalistic, but at the same time you get like the like robot is a type or something, right?
It's I forget what it is, but they're a type.
They've got like kind of like techie sort of based ones as well. Yeah,
and they have like crystal and you know, they're just different.
They're different typings a little bit, but what it is for this one is I think it's kind of polarizing. It has a very distinct art style. Like it's not doing the Pokemon art, it's not doing pixel art. Like it's very much doing almost kind of like a watercolor kind of like very like interesting blue, lot of blues and purples and that kind of like almost like painted sort of style for the creatures, and the whole game is in that style, and I really like how it looks, but I could definitely see someone disliking it just because it's a bit more of a niche art style instead of being like a safe kind of thing that like a Nexomon goes for. So I like it a lot, and I found a lot of creatures. Like one of the tests to me to see how good the creature design is how frequently I'm like, oh fuck, can I put that on my team?
Right.
And I'm constantly like, oh no, I got another one I want to use. Like,
that's true.
I've already got 6 water types I really like. So I think the design is really cool. Like you got, maybe you'll get into it, like you're kind of on the cusp of like finding some cool stuff. Psypat is one of my favorite designs. He's like this cool duck. He's got like a big clam on his head, and he's got like a trident.
It's a Psy.
Is this, yeah,
like
makes sense.
Raphael.
Like side pat, sure, yeah, that checks out. But I think he's super cool. Like he's an animal, but he's got a weapon, and like later on, you get this one I really like that's like a pig, but he's got like clouds and he
wings,
flies. And like
I think the creature designs are cool. I would have preferred a different art style for the creature designs.
That's fair.
Like something like, you know, I was talking Persona, I used the word grotesque. Like I would love to see a creature catching game where they're all like kind of demonic, and like Temtem like that would be even cooler, you know. But so Temtem's great. One thing about the battle system too, which I don't know if it was in when you played last, because it's been a while, but I really wanted to point out that the doubles function, like beyond just strategizing, is even more in depth than that, because there's certain moves that actually get a bonus for using if your partner's a certain type. Like so my starter is a crystal type, and he can have like crystal rain coming down on people. But if I have a flying or a wind type monster as my partner, that move actually gets a power buff and like gets stronger. So I think there's some really interesting ways. You're not just balancing out types for defense, but you're also balancing them out in terms of abilities for buffing your own guys for who they want to be a partner with on the field. And that is something that is like another layer of team building. That was in there
too. I got that, and I think I had a move where it like did a bit of damage, but if I had a certain creature with me, it also like put them to sleep or something. And I was like, that is super neat. Just that extra little like wrinkle where it's like, it's still a good move regardless, but if you get that kicker.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's a good game. We got to rank it here now. What do we think?
I think this is a clear S tier.
I think Temtem's S tier as well.
I think this is an unstoppable behemoth. And out of all of these games on this list, the one I'm going back to and I'm gonna like start playing it is Temtem.
Same with me. I feel it's belonging here just because we haven't beaten Temtem.
That's true.
We haven't played enough of it in its current form, because again, it's gone through like this huge beta thing. I feel like we would be irresponsible to say it's the best one without having beaten it, especially considering how good I think we both think Cyber Sleuth is, and especially myself.
You know what? I think this is fair, and I wouldn't agree to the reasons that you just laid out, but the reason I will give it for is I think Temtem is by far mechanically the best game on this list. Maybe not Persona, but that's like for completely different reasons. But like Temtem is by far the best creature capture game ever made, I think. However, that dopamine rush of the constant like breadcrumb trail of digivolving all the goddamn time in Cyber Sleuth is just, it's like drugs. Like Temtem is like a steak dinner, like a fucking fancy delicious, like there's a balsamic fig sauce on there, like it is the highest quality meal you can have. But Digimon Cyber Sleuth is when like you're kind of drunk and you have like
you go to the ice cream thing.
You're kind of drunk and you have like your favorite snack in front of you. Yeah. And like that might win every time.
I think it does. And you're right. Like when it comes down to it, it's all about the creatures, right? For this tier list. And the flexibility, the evolving in Digimon, Cyber Sleuth, the frequency of it, just, the switching around, it is unparalleled, isn't it? So okay, any final switches you think we need to make on our tiers?
Honestly, I'm super stoked about how we've ordered this.
I think so too. I like it too. So we'll save it, and whenever we play either Yokai Watch, Monster Crown, Monster Hunter Stories, or your write-in bonus, we'll add it to the list and see where we think it ranks. Because I mean, I personally would have never thought like Nexomon before we played it would be anywhere near better than these games. You know, it is. So. Yeah, kind of cool.
Right.
That was fun. So I guess we'll our best game we'll have is Digimon Cyber Sleuth Story, all the way down to the worst, Digimon World 1. We'll post an image of the tier list, so everyone can see if they're not watching the video version of the show. But I guess for now, we're an hour and a half in. This is a long ass podcast, everybody. But you know what? This is what you get sometimes. And here we go. We'll talk about our next topic now, which Kate, actually, you can go first today. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, before I do my topic, we had a couple submissions for people. We asked like, what is your favorite creature capture and why?
Right. And to point it out, that is our listener mail for the week, because we always do listener mail at the end of the show to answer a question. But sometimes when we have a topic like this, we write in for your answers and do it in the middle of the show, which we're going to do now.
It's fun to get your opinions. And so I had two that were kind of fun and stood out. So Zane has responded, and he's kind of he said like Pokemon, but he specified Pokemon ROM hacks because they focus a little bit more on like some strategy and like changing the mechanics, making them a bit more of like a serious like tough game. So he went Pokemon ROM hacks, and then a second later he was like, oh wait, no, I remembered Monster Sanctuary. So he was one of the guys that actually got me into Monster Sanctuary. So that's his vote. His vote is Monster Sanctuary. And then I learned about the coolest thing I didn't know existed, and I'm not going to play it, but it's so fucking cool, is did you know Jonah has told me and enlightened me to the fact that there was basically Pokemon within World of Warcraft, and you can still play it.
Really?
And so it's a legit like turn-based thing. They all have...
It's a hack?
No, it's in World of Warcraft. It's just something you can do in World of Warcraft is like catch monsters. And you can like battle them, and they all have like types that are like a type chart, but also like they do different things, or like beast types get like stronger when they're like below health, like below 50% health and stuff like that. And you can like World of Warcraft, like just ditch doing whatever you normally do in WoW and like just catch creatures.
I had no idea that existed.
That's so cool. But then you have to pay for the Warcraft subscription and shit, and so like it's not... I'm not gonna
buy Nexomon for $1.44.
Exactly. But that blew my mind.
That's
like
cool.
I can't believe I never knew that existed, and it's like legit, like just like a weird niche thing you can go and do in that world. That's fucking cool.
I wholeheartedly agree. And it's also really fucking cool that Zane and Jonah gave us some listener mail answers. So again, if you want to be like them, it'd be really cool. Let us know what your favorite creature capturing games are. Like I said, you can write into CloudControlPod at proton.me, or of course on Twitter as well at CloudControlPod. You can tweet us your answers as well. So that's just a reminder to get involved with the show there. And now that we have not forgotten about listener mail, we'll move to our next topic, which of course is this time, take it away, Kate. You want to talk about a book today. I
do. It's something a little different. So, I mean, obviously I game a lot, but I haven't gamed a hell of a lot this last week. But I always read most nights before I go to bed. Books, I would say, are my equal up there with video games in terms of like my
your entertainment
my
time
entertainment
division.
That's right. And I finished this book recently, and it's one of those books where like it's kind of unassuming, but it just sticks with you. And so I just want to like shout out, it's called The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry, written by Rachel Joyce. And this is one of my favorite things in the world, where like sometimes I get into a big like sprawling fantasy series and you just want like a massive epic world to live in. But one of my actual favorite genres of books is like slice of life stuff. And so this is kind of about a very unremarkable person kind of in a remarkable part of their life. And so the idea is that he's this old man, he's like must be at least in his 70s, like he's retired, this older guy. And someone he used to know and was very close with and kind of like didn't end on bad terms with, but there's definitely a tension in the air, and you don't know what it is at first, but she's dying of cancer in like the north of England, and he lives in the south of England. And so the book is basically about, he decides that he's going to walk all the way from the south of England to the like top north, and like it's got this beautiful little map, you can look at it and follow along. And I was like, oh, I've been there, like I know where that is. And so that's it's cute in that way. And he just walks, and the whole time he walks he meets like various quirky people along the way, and he like ruminates a lot about his life. And it actually, to warn you, gets incredibly fucking sad.
It sounds
like,
incredibly sad.
A lot of it is like, oh, nice, like charming, whimsical walking across the countryside. But more of it is like, I'm going to think about all the things I regret. Like all the things I wish I had done differently.
What have I done wrong in my life?
And like, you know, these relationships I used to have that I don't have anymore. And like, imagine I used to be happy. Like,
why did I spend so much time playing Digimon World 1?
That's right, because I could have been playing Cyber Sleuth. And he just walks, and like, you just get like such a look into this man's life, and a lot of the things that he's regretful of or sorrowful of are just so like human experiences that you can relate to. Like he is very much just like such a normal person with normal like wants and needs and memories, and he just remembers the small things. Like I remember how my wife used to laugh when we first met, like those kind of things. And he's just it's such a remarkable book about someone unremarkable doing like an extraordinary thing, right? Like he's just walking, but what a thing to do. And it turns into this pilgrimage of like, you know, it's gonna save her, like, you know, wait, I hope she's still like alive when I get there. And he's like picking up souvenirs, like, well, maybe like she can hang this, like, cause she's in like a hospice or something. He's like, well, maybe she can hang this by your like windowsill. And it's such an emotional book. Like I've wanted to cry so many times, but you just fall in love with Harold like the second you start reading. And
it sounds really lovely.
It's really good. It's the kind of story where it's like they could make like an indie game about this, you know, like a 3-hour indie game of like living through this Harold story.
It reminds me kind of the story of To the Moon. To the Moon. Remember when I don't know if you played that one, but it's sort of similar.
I've got it downloaded.
Like walking through someone's life and reliving their memories and sort of those. It sounds really appealing.
It's a very deep and intimate and personal book, and it's not very long. It's the kind of thing where if you're not a big reader or like you're intimidated by like massive series, like you can just pick it up and it's like just emotional and you just kind of fall in love with the characters and with the world because they're so human. It's really like he could exist, this could be a real person, and I connect to that almost more in a way than like, you know, a big hero is gonna save the day
for sure.
You'll never meet that guy, but you could meet Harold, right?
I was gonna ask, this is fictional, right?
It is fictional, yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was based off like a real story or something, but
no, but you could really believe it is reading it, but it is fictional. That's
amazing. I have interest to read this now, and I'm not a huge reader, as people know. Like I do like reading, but I fall off of stuff really easily. So the fact that it's a standalone thing is like very appealing to me. But that's really cool. For my one more thing or extra topic, I want to talk about a TV show that I've been watching, Yellowjackets. Everybody
sounds good.
So I'm halfway through the first season. It's just been, I think it was renewed for a second season a couple of months ago, so I'm pretty excited for that. And Yellowjackets it's a horror kind of TV show, but the reason that I really got into it was that, as people know, I'm a big Lost fan. We love Lost on this podcast. Lost. In fact, if you like today's tier list, you can go back in our backlog and watch us rank all the characters. And when we say all the characters,
we ranked all the characters.
All of them. We ranked them in a big tier list too. But Yellowjackets is sort of a similar premise. It's a story of a girls' soccer team. It's set kind of in two eras. It's a story of this girls' soccer team. They're in high school. It's set in I think it's 1996, and they're going to a soccer tournament. Their plane crashes. It actually crashes in the Pacific Northwest in like, you know, Canadian Rockies or whatever. So it's close to home for us, like sort of similar environment, which is cool. But it's this girls' team that, you know, there are a couple coaches, a couple other people on the plane, but they're crash landed and they're surviving in this natural environment. And you know, you'll watch the trailer, you instantly feel like there's a creepiness to it. Like it's not just a nature survival show. There is something going on that's a little off or paranormal, and you know, they find sort of like, you know, the other signs that other people have been around, even though it's this wilderness area, you know, just like Lost. And there's some different things that happen. But the cool part of the show is not just the survival aspect. It's also the story, although it's happening in 1996, is actually being you know, that's the A story. The B story is actually fast forward to 2021 when the show came out last year. And it's actually being recounted at the same time and with some of the characters who are now adults. And so you're seeing kind of the fallout of what happened to them. You know, how has this affected their life? Like what happened to them on this trip? That's
one of my favorite like ways of storytelling is like, here's A and here's like Z, and how did we like bridge? It's very like Haunting of Hill House.
Totally,
that too. I love that style.
Yeah, it's like that. And you know, it's really interesting how it fills the gaps in, because of course not all the characters that are in the survival portion are present in the modern day.
Right.
So, you know, I found out recently like one character has died, but some of them haven't been mentioned. Like, are they just not there? Did something happen to them in the wilderness? Like, I don't know, but I'm really interested. Like the girl who's the main character, you can see right now on the card, if you're watching on the video, like she's the captain of the soccer team, you know, and on the mountain, she's like kind of the main character you follow. But in the real life, I've yet to see her. Ooh, so like, I don't know where she is or who she is or what. And, you know, there's some... I wouldn't say it's overly scary. I introduced it as a horror show. I haven't really felt scared watching it, but there's just little airs of unsettling themes that are coming up. Like, you know, they had to hunt animals, and they have really a graphic scene of like eating deer meat and stuff, and then it'll go to the next fast forward to the future and someone will be asking, like, one of the characters, she's become a politician and she's at this like highbrow party and they're talking about like, so how did you really survive out there? And she can really tell like, oh, she doesn't want to tell like, we had to eat this like, scavenged meat, like this gross stuff, and like, was there cannibalism? I don't know, like it's kind of implied, but we haven't seen it, and like she doesn't want to talk about it, and there's just so much mystery, and I can't wait to unwrap sort of what happened and how did they get to this place where they're at, and what are these man-made things, where are they coming from in the mountain? Like there's just that air of mystery.
That's so neat. I think that's like the strongest thing that style does is when you see it after, because when you're just watching it like chronologically, it's like there's that mystery of what's going to happen, but when you see the aftermath and you see like how traumatized the character is, it's like, okay, what did that to them? Like what got them to this part? You can really see like how all the dust settled, and that to me is a bigger hook to find out what happened than just like what's coming next. Yeah,
it's pretty cool, and you're beginning to see like halfway through the season now, I'm beginning to see the team, they're kind of realizing oh, maybe we're not gonna get saved, sort of like Lost, right? Like they're planning to get saved, or we'll just make a shelter, we'll find some water and they'll come, and they're kind of getting to their realization, like it might be a while, and they're sort of different sides beginning to form, and the character dynamics, now that you got to know them, it's just very, very fascinating. And it's an ensemble cast that doesn't really have one standout sort of actor, at least that I've recognized. They're all doing a good job, but I really like it when it's not like, well, there's this high-end actor and you're going to be following them. Like I like how it's kind of spread amongst this whole cast, and you get to sort of know them, and you're rooting for certain people.
So good.
It's a good show. I would highly recommend. I don't want to watch
it alone because I'm a little scared, but I really do want to watch it.
Highly recommend it. It's got some dark humor in there as well. Like it's got a lot of moments of like, oh, that's pretty funny.
Does it kind of feel, because it reminds me, like thinking of Hill House, it reminds me of like Hill House, like Bly, like those kind of like.
Those are scarier.
Those are scarier.
Okay. You would be fine to watch this. I've watched, like I said, 5 episodes. I would say there's probably been one portion where I felt like, oh, that would have been creepy if I was watching at night, like by myself. But I think that's a good barometer.
Okay, it's more of just like a tense atmosphere.
It's tense, and it's more just a mystery.
Right.
Like I think Lost is creepier than this too.
Okay.
Like at the start, Lost has some scary parts.
Ethan shows up in Lost, and that's one of the to this day one of the scariest things. Like, oh my god, I'm glad I don't remember my dreams, because I'd have nightmares of Ethan like weekly. Like that guy's terrifying.
1,000%. But yeah, anyway, that's Yellowjackets. I don't want to spoil anything. I'm not gonna tell you much else.
Well, you've hyped me up. I want to watch Yellowjackets.
Yeah, you should.
So good.
You should, and I might talk about it again when I finish the first season. We'll see. But right now, high recommendations. Watch Yellowjackets, everybody. And that's going to end the show for today. We've already done our listener mail question, so that's great. The email address, our Twitter. Let us know what you think about our tier list. I'm fascinated if people agree with us or if they think we're crazy, because
they're like, what? You put Neopets in C tier?
Neopets is definitely above Bugsnax. Come on. All right, everybody. Well, this has been the Cloud Control Video Game Podcast. You can catch us here every week as you usually do. And remember, this is the show that's not just good. It's good enough. And we'll see you on the next episode.